Now you can hear me. Now you can hear me. Stupid StreamYard. It was on my wrong headset. Wrong headset. So you guys can all hear me now? Can you hear me now? Give me some thumbs up or ones. Yes, cool. So I wanted to jump in, just to repeat. I wanted to clarify a little bit on this infrastructure bill. We went over it a couple weeks ago on Truth Will Set You Free with Suni Russo, and I think it was no, it was Kevin. Kevin was there. And with this infrastructure bill, I learned that this morning, and it really bothers me. It really, really bothers me that it turns out there is a pilot program for pay per mile of travel in your vehicle. It's hidden in this bill. No one's really talking about it. It's some local news stations are talking about it. It's starting to spread around the social media, which that's where I started getting some information about it. I've been reading about it all morning, and I'm really annoyed, honestly. I said 2 weeks ago, it's going to happen with these electric vehicles because we're not paying gas tax anymore. So they're going to want to pass a bill that will enforce some sort of pay per mile travel, some sort of it. We don't know how, but they want to do it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go over a little bit of the details, what we know now, what's in the bill, what we expect, how long this is going to take for this pilot program. And then I'm also going to go over a little bit about what we already know Joe Biden announced a little bit ago. So real quickly, let me go ahead and pull up some stuff, and then we will hash this out. So on here, just so you guys know, like this is where I started going over some of the details and explaining in Truth Will Set You Free, like this is coming. So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip real quick just to show everybody, like, hey, we have already said this is coming, and we are going to have to deal with this.
Thing there is on the environment is
give me some thumbs up or some likes. Let me know if you can hear that with electric vehicles that this big push is going to cause. And you realize that we pay for our roads mostly with our gas tax right now.
Yep.
So when you pay for gas, you actually pay for our infrastructure.
Yep.
So when they push this electric vehicle thing and they get to this big target that Joe Biden was talking about by 2030, now you're going to have to pay per mile you drive. And then the government's going to slowly just increase the price per mile that you drive, which is then going to limit on how much you could drive because you're not going to be able to afford it anymore. Gas tax doesn't even increase that much.
Sherry,
that was the first little clip of it. And then we come back and we talk as a group when I come back to it, and we say, hey, like, is this something that you guys would support? And so we go over it and we all talk about, would we support this? And so this is, again, on Truth Will Set You Free on 8/10, almost 2 weeks ago. We were talking about it, and we were talking about this because we were talking about the infrastructure bill. I did not realize this part was in the infrastructure bill. So we're just kind of talking about it, and now here today I'm realizing it's actually in there. You guys, I'm curious, what are your guys' thoughts? Would you guys support paying per mile instead of paying for gas tax?
No. It's neither. But the idea that you're going to be paying per mile, like, what is the charge going to be? A penny? Because the average person drives around 12,000 miles a year, $1,000 a month. Are you going to charge a penny? Because that's $120 extra. Are you going to charge a dime? Now you're looking at $1,200 a year. You're $1. So you're trying to tell me that you're gonna it's just absolutely asinine. It is ridiculous, and it is absolutely going to punish minorities more than anyone else. Although there is something to be said for robust, I guess, transit. But dude, if you live in LA, there is no transit. If you live there are a lot of big cities where if you lived, you must own a car, and there's at least 20 million people in LA alone that must own cars. Right. I'm kind of getting off there, but
You're getting off? Whoa, it's not that kind of show.
Yeah, we're going to cut it off there, but because we kind of didn't go off track. But just to go over this bill, to highlight some of the details here. So I kind of cut it out into sections so I can actually go over and explain some of this detail to everyone. So this is section 13,002 and National Motor Vehicle per Mile User Fee Pilot. And so this is where it is actually set up in the system. It will in the infrastructure bill that they want to start piloting it, figuring out how to do it and how to make it within people's income is what they're claiming. We all know the government doesn't care about those things. And so that is something we're going to talk about here shortly. But when we're talking about establishing this program, their objectives or the pilot program are to test the design, acceptance, implementation, financial sustainability of a national motor vehicle per mile user fee, to address the need for additional revenue for surface transportation infrastructure and national motor vehicle per mile user fee. Notice there is nothing in here talking about, is it feasible for Americans to afford this? They only want to talk about how we sustain our infrastructure. Nothing in the objectives is this logical? Because, and we're going to touch on this in a minute when we get down to the end, is how do they determine, is this successful or not? Nothing in here mentions, is it successful? There is a little mention on some things in the feasibility of it at the end, and we'll touch on that in just a second. So the parameters in carrying out the pilot program is to solicit volunteers. And so they want volunteers to be able to do it in all 50 states, along with District of Columbia, which most people, I hope you understand, Washington, D.C. is not part of America. They are actually completely separate. District of Columbia, and then Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, so we're going to go and charge Puerto Rico per mile when we already charge them U.S. taxes. We already charge them a whole bunch of things, and they don't get the infrastructure or any of the stuff that the U.S. actually provides to the 50 states along with D.C. So we're going to just go charge Puerto Rico more of that stuff. Cool. Great. And then we're going to include commercial vehicles and passenger motor vehicles in this. Excuse me. So not only are we going to charge us citizens in our travel, we're going to charge us per mile to travel, regardless of it's gas or electric. That is not specified in this bill. You will be paying per mile, and then we're also going to charge commercial vehicles. So how much do we actually utilize when it comes to truckers and people that transport things from ports, from the ocean to the interstates, the landlocked states? How do they get there? Is it by plane? Is it by what? It's all by truck mostly. And so they go by the semi trucks that are on the road, and they're going to increase the cost of those commercial vehicles that will be transporting those things. This will also increase the cost of delivery vehicles. So all of your shipping costs will go up. People don't realize the impact of paying per mile when you start including commercial and passenger vehicles. This is all to get more money into our government because we're spending more money like no other. I'm personally getting $550 a month because I have 2 kids, because our government is that ridiculous. And Barbara, getting a bike, we're going to touch on that in just a minute. They have electric bikes in here. So if your electric bike goes over the speed of 26 miles per hour, you actually will fall under the passenger motor vehicles statute, to where you then have to pay per mile there. That is actually in this bill too. So hopefully if you buy a bike, it's a pedal bike to where you don't go over 26 miles an hour. And if it's an electric bike with pedal assist, you don't go over 26 miles per hour. That is how fine-tuned this is written and how this is coming about. So let's come down to the next section where we're looking at the advisory board. So who is running this pilot program? This pilot program is they're going to establish within 90 days of this bill passing. So right now, this bill, just to be clear for everybody, this bill is actually pending still to be signed off and voted on by the House. It's been approved by the Senate, but it still has to go through the House. There is a way we can stop it, and we'll touch on that at the end. So they're going to be putting together all of this stuff and to be able to set up an advisory board to where they can follow this pilot program and advise people, well, come up with a program that seems effective on how we can charge per mile for everyone. And so the other part is that I don't like is they are carrying out a public awareness campaign is up to, and I think I highlighted that later right here, May. So the secretary may carry out a public awareness campaign. May. It's not mandated because they don't want this known to everyone. They only want this known to the people that will volunteer for it. And and I'm going to be very, I'm really pissed at this bill right now. The tree huggers that really want to keep people from driving their vehicles because it's ruining the society, even though America doesn't put out nearly the O2 emissions compared to India and China. We do nothing compared to those two countries, but America has to own the responsibility of it. But we may carry out a public awareness campaign. We're not guaranteed to do it. We're not forced to do it. It's up to the person that's the secretary of the campaign. So we'll just find out if we actually get told this is actually going to happen, because I don't see this being talked about very much anywhere else. So let me go back a little bit. Membership. So they're going to actually have some people from state departments and transportation. Makes sense. Any public or nonprofit entity that led surface transportation systems funding alternatives pilot project under section 6020 of the FAST Act. Okay, fair enough. Representatives of the trucking industry and including owner-operator of independent drivers. Good. So these people need to speak up if this is going to impact the costs of them. However, we also don't know what side conversations are going to happen to influence them to just be like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to support this. Data security experts to expertise on personal privacy. That is one of the big things that I'm highlighting here, because now you are now tied every time you go. On top of, if this was to go through and we actually have this put in place, not just the pilot program, we actually go through with it, you're paying for registration of your vehicle. You will still most likely pay for gas because there's nothing in this bill saying they are intending to get rid of gas tax. Notice the objectives that I highlighted up here. Nothing in here says we want to get rid of gas tax. Not a single thing. So if you have a gas vehicle, you could be paying this per mile cost and gas tax when you can get when you start filling up your car at the pump. Nothing is mentioned about gas tax of removing that. That is not mentioned in here at all. It is probably implied, but it should be in this bill. On top of that, so the data security, what I was getting to is now you are going to be tracked and logged with the government on how many miles you travel every year, because that will be associated most likely with your registration of your vehicle every year, because that's the only way I can logically come up with how they do this, because they would plug in their OBD2 thing into your car. It would log the miles that are on your car, and it would show from last year to this year what the miles are. They currently even do that here in Utah. I don't know if it's in all states, but if you look at when you have your emissions done, it tells you last miles of your emissions and then your current miles of emissions. So it's already being done. And so now we're looking at how do we do data security with that? Okay, great. So we're just logging and keeping track of information of how much people travel. Academic and experts on surface transportation systems. So that one is where we're going to actually start looking at the transportation systems and how we can actually look at things, pad the system, add more people in that most likely support limiting people driving. And on top of that, we're going to talk about another section of this bill, which is the carbon reduction strategy. And we're going to add that here in just a minute. And advocacy groups focused on equity. Okay. So we're going to bring in advocacy groups. I want to know which ones. So this is where they're like, oh, okay, so we might be able to help some of the people that couldn't afford this. So we're going to bring them in and they can talk about it. And some of them might not even own cars. They use public transportation. So are they going to really care? I don't know. Owners of motor vehicle fleets. So this is where you're going to have all of the big trucking companies or transportation companies. You're going to have the taxi cab companies. All of them, they need to actually be representing in here because this is going to impact them. They're going to have to pay extra for those things. Not only are we going to have to start talking about in this scenario, we're going to talk about Lyft and Uber and what the cost this is going to be for the end user, the people that are going around and helping people just travel across town. And we're trying to promote that as that's a safe way of driving. You've had a few drinks at the bar, call an Uber, right? But now that person that's doing an Uber has to charge more because they have to pay this cost. If this all goes into play, because again, this is a pilot program. It's not for sure going into play, but this bill needs to be shut down. Anyways, owners and operators of toll facilities. Yeah, that's a given. Tribal groups and representatives. That's a given. Any other representatives or entities as determined appropriate by secretary. This part I do not like. The reason why I say that is because this person may pull in because it's all by the secretary. So the secretary may be wanting to bring in a whole bunch of people that are very strictly opposed of any vehicle being driven on the road, and they can bring in a whole bunch of stuff. No, we should actually outline all the groups that can be impacted by this bill and only include those groups. If this needs to be amended because there is a group that was left out, let's amend the bill. Do not leave it up to a single person to add any other representatives or entities to this. Anyway, so that is the membership on how they are actually going to conduct this program, this pilot program. And so this pilot program is actually going to go into effect 90 days after the bill is signed from the House. So we have an opportunity again to stop this. Not later than 1 year after the date at which the advisory board is established under the paragraph 1, which we already went over. The advisory board shall provide the secretary with the recommendations described in subparagraph of that paragraph, which the secretary shall use in implementing the pilot program. So the pilot program can be signed off. And, well, this bill can pass, but in 90 days, we got to start putting everybody together. But we have to start this pilot program no later than a year from this bill passing. Okay, which is fine. That's kind of standard with bills. I would expect that. But I'm going to get to some of the timeline stuff here in just a minute. We're going to look at how convenient all of this is coming together. And so they're going to have to report to Congress not later than 1 year after the date on which the volunteer participants begin participating in the pilot program. So one of the things that I didn't mention, it's because it's later on in the bill and it highlighted it at the end. Actually, it's right here. For each of the fiscal years, 2022 through 2026, we will allocate $10 million shall be used to carry out the pilot program under this section. So we will be carrying out this pilot program from 2022 to 2026. And we're going to touch on that in a minute. So we're going to come back to the 2026 year. Whether the objective is described in subsection 2 were achieved, how volunteer participants' protections in subsection were complied with, whether motor vehicle per mile user fees can maintain long-term solvency of the highway trust and fund and improve and maintain the surface transportation system. So can this support our system of all of our infrastructure, our bridges, our roads, all of those things? Can this happen? And so if this can happen, they will do it. But again, I'm going to remind you, nothing in the objectives say, can we remove the gas tax? So we don't know if they are going to take the gas tax in part of this and still take that into consideration to say this was successful or not. Nothing is specifying that. How privacy of volunteers was maintained, now that's fine, that's understandable. So they want to maintain privacy of what they're driving, but it's already being tracked. This is just going to put more of an impact on it and probably even make it public. Who knows? Equity impacts of the pilot program, including the impacts of pilot program on low-income commuters. This is the one part that I was talking about is in here. They're not really talking about a whole lot of the detail around the people that just drive because they're on Social Security or they're on welfare or government assistance of some way. You're just going to add more money to their cost. And so they want to evaluate this. But why isn't that in the objectives? We're just going to report it to Congress. We're not going to make sure that this bill actually is sustainable for anybody that's low income or anybody that's on a fixed income or any of those things. We're not going to make sure that's sustainable. We're just going to go ahead and just low income commuters. We're going to look at that. It's super frustrating when you read this bill and you start going through it and you read all of the garbage in here and they say it's an infrastructure bill. It is an infrastructure bill a little bit, but a lot of it is just to pass the cost to us. To us. We're going to be paying more. There is nothing in here stating they want to get rid of the gas tax. Super frustrating. Now, on to the carbon reduction strategy section of this bill. And so they want to facilitate the use of vehicles or modes of travel that result in lower transportation emissions per person mile traveled as compared to existing vehicles and modes. So they're trying to reduce our carbon emissions, and they are wanting to do this, and this is another section of the bill. They want to actually lower the transportation emissions per person mile traveled compared to existing vehicles and modes. So already in another section, they're trying to tell us we need to be driving less. We need to be driving less. And so that's what they're wanting to do. They want to force us to drive us less. Keep in mind, what did we just go over? They want us to pay per mile. What did I warn you about? That this is actually going to cause some risk, that they are going to want to limit us on how much we can travel freely within our country. We have to now pay per mile. So we want to update the updates on the carbon reduction strategy of the state developed under the paragraph shall be updated not less frequently than once every 4 years. And so now they are saying they can increase the cost potentially. So if you take these two things together, along with the pay per mile, they could potentially increase the per mile cost that we all drive every 4 years. Because they evaluated it and they found that we need to do that. This is a ridiculous bill, not to mention all the other garbage in there. But when we start talking about paying per mile just to travel freely within our country, it is completely ridiculous. And Amy, you're saying they won't make much off of you. That's fine. That you're focused on you. Cool. I'm focused on what's better for America. This is not a bill for America. For people that have to travel 12 to 15,000 miles a year, like what Kevin was mentioning in Truth Will Set You Free a couple weeks ago, when we are looking at this, this is actually going to impact some of the people. And Amy, just to highlight, this is going to impact commercial vehicles. So yes, they will make money off of you because commercial vehicle costs are going to go up. Uber costs, Lyft costs, cab costs, any of that is going to go up. And the other thing that I also haven't confirmed in here is what is this going to do for public transportation? Are they going to pay more, or are we just pushing everybody to do more public transportation? So on top of this, the other part that I wanted to bring up with everyone and tie all of this together and look at the dates and the timelines. And we look at this bill. So 2022 is when they want this to take off. So 2022, they run the pilot program, excuse me, for 4 years till 2026, spend $10 million a year in doing it. Biden signs an executive order to aiming for half of new vehicles to be electric by 2030. Is that a coincidence or not? Because all of a sudden he signs this bill saying this executive order saying half of new vehicles sold by 2030 all have to be electric. So they're not going to be paying that gas tax anymore. So yes, we do have to make up that money. And all of a sudden, what's hidden in the infrastructure bill that no one was really talking about is per mile tax. That I was talking about 2 weeks ago, and I've been saying for years, I love electric vehicles, but it brings one negative effect. Well, a couple, but the main one on cost to us Americans is this per mile tax that's going to be coming on. This is all coming together. This is where the entire government doesn't care about us. You have the infrastructure bill that was signed off by the Senate. You have Joe Biden signing an executive order that is putting 50% of electric vehicles on the road by 2030, which forces us to have a bill like the infrastructure bill to make us pay per mile we travel. This is just a ridiculous thing that we cannot be done. Cannot pass. We cannot do it. We have to speak up and contact our House representatives and tell them this cannot go through. This cannot go through. So when we start talking about these bills and we start going over this stuff, you got to make sure that you're paying attention. Suni and I and Eric did a show a long time ago, a month ago, about distractions. There are distractions that are out there. Think about Afghanistan right now. It's not a distraction and it's an important thing for us to pay attention to. But the House comes back, I believe, next week. And I guarantee you this bill will be one of the first things on the table that they're going to be talking about. And so we have to make sure that our House knows they cannot pass this bill. It is not for the American people. This bill is going to oppress the American people and control the American people. So I just wanted to jump on, highlight some of the stuff that I found today. I'm a little annoyed and frustrated, and we need to be engaged. I know we've been saying this all along, engaged with your representatives and all of that. I know it gets old. This is why this bill cannot pass the House. Cannot pass the House. So please contact your representatives if you don't want this bill to go through by the stuff that we just highlighted and went through and that was in there. Please contact your representatives, hound them, annoy the crap out of them. Tell them they represent you and you are voicing your opinion that this should not pass. It is not good for the American people. But I just wanted to outline that for everyone, do a quick show, outline that stuff. I hope it was a good thing to open everybody's mind to and share. Share this information out, get it out to everyone that you can, and let's see what we can do. I've already emailed all of my representatives this morning out of frustration. There were some very colorful words in there. I'm sure it was not very productive, but I'll follow up again next week. I encourage you to do the same. So let's make sure we voice this to the House of Representatives that represent you. They represent you. Voice this, that this should not pass. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys have a great Saturday. I don't want to ruin your weekend. Make sure you enjoy it, relax. I hope you guys all have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys later.